You might be making a mistake that has no way back, and you don't even realize it. Think about that for a moment. What if the very thing holding you back, keeping you from the life you've been praying for, isn't something external, but something within you? What if, without even realizing it, you've been pushing away the very blessings God has been trying to place in your hands? Maybe you've been feeling stuck lately, like no matter how hard you try, nothing moves forward. You pray, but your prayers seem to hit a wall. You ask for guidance, but all you hear is silence. You step out in faith, only to find yourself facing more resistance, more obstacles, more closed doors. And at some point, you start to wonder, why? Why is nothing changing? Why does it feel like my life is on pause while others around me seem to be moving ahead? Let me tell you something powerful. God never ignores His children. If it feels like heaven is silent, if it seems like your prayers aren't being answered, it's not because God isn't listening, it's because there's something in the way. There's something blocking the flow of blessings in your life. And most of the time, that something isn't an external force, it's a choice, a mindset, an action you may not even realize you're making. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Because today, I'm going to reveal the 3 biggest mistakes that could be disappointing God. Mistakes that might be keeping you from stepping into the life He has planned for you. And let me be clear, the last one, it could be irreversible. Once you cross that line, there might not be a way back. This isn't just another message. This isn't just something to listen to and move on with your day. This is a wake-up call. Because if you don't recognize these mistakes now, they could cost you something you can't afford to lose. But here's the good news. God is a God of grace. He's a God of second chances. And if you're hearing this message, it means He is giving you the opportunity to change, to realign your heart, to correct your course, to step into the favor and blessings that have been waiting for you all along. So I need you to do something right now. If you're ready to receive what God has for you, if you're ready to shift your life and step into a new season, type "I'm ready to change" in the comments. Declare it. Speak it. Let it be known that you are making the choice right here, right now, to remove anything that might be keeping you from God's best. And make sure you stay with me until the end, because what I'm about to share with you could be the key that unlocks the breakthrough you've been waiting for. First mistake, the doubt that weakens your faith. Doubt is one of the most dangerous things that can creep into your heart, because it doesn't just stay in one place, it spreads. It starts small, like a whisper in your mind. What if this doesn't work? What if God doesn't come through? What if I'm just fooling myself? And before you know it, that doubt begins to take root, chipping away at your faith little by little, until one day, you realize that you're no longer standing on firm ground. Faith isn't about believing when everything is going well. Faith is about standing firm when everything around you is shaking. But the moment you let doubt take over, you stop trusting God fully, and when you stop trusting, you start sinking. Think about Peter. He saw Jesus walking on water, and in that moment, he had faith. He had so much faith that when Jesus called him, he stepped out of the boat and started walking on water himself. Imagine that. Peter, a mere man, defying the very laws of nature because he chose to believe. But then something happened. The winds picked up, the waves grew stronger, and instead of keeping his eyes on Jesus, Peter let fear creep in. He started looking at the storm instead of looking at his Savior, and the moment he doubted, he sank. That's exactly what happens in our lives. When we trust God, when we focus on Him, when we stand on His promises, we walk on water. But the second we let fear and doubt take over, we start sinking into our problems, into our worries, into our own limited understanding. So let me ask you, do you have real faith? Or do you only believe when things are going well? It's easy to have faith when life is good, when the bills are paid, when your health is strong, when your prayers are being answered exactly the way you expected. But what about when the storm comes? What about when life doesn't make sense? What about when you're praying and it feels like nothing is happening? Faith isn't about seeing, it's about believing even when you can't see. It's about trusting that God is working even when it feels like everything is falling apart. It's about stepping out of the boat, keeping your eyes on Him, and refusing to let fear dictate your next move. So here's my challenge for you. Make a decision today to trust God completely, not just when things are easy, not just when you feel strong, but even in the moments when doubt tries to creep in, even when the storm feels too big, even when the answers don't come right away. Say it out loud. I will trust God no matter what. Write it in the comments. Declare it. Because faith is not just something you feel, it's something you choose. And when you choose faith over doubt, you position yourself for miracles. Now, let's move forward. Because the next mistake, it's even more dangerous. The second mistake, the pride that blocks grace. Pride is one of the most deceptive dangers to your spiritual life because it doesn't always look like pride at first. Sometimes it looks like confidence. Sometimes it looks like independence. Sometimes it even disguises itself as wisdom. But make no mistake, pride is the very thing that can block the flow of God's grace in your life. When you rely too much on your own strength, when you refuse to surrender, when you insist on doing things your way instead of trusting God's direction, you are shutting the door to the blessings that could have been yours. And the worst part? Many people don't even realize they're doing it. One of the clearest examples of this in the Bible is King Saul. He had everything: God's calling, God's favor, victories in battle, a kingdom entrusted to him. But what happened? Pride crept in. Instead of fully obeying God, Saul started making decisions based on what he thought was best. Instead of trusting God's instructions, he tried to control the outcome on his own terms. And that's the danger of pride. It makes you believe that you know better than God. When God commanded Saul to completely destroy the Amalekites, Saul obeyed. Partially. He did most of what God asked, but he kept some of the spoils for himself. When confronted by the prophet Samuel, instead of humbling himself and admitting his mistake, Saul justified his actions. He twisted the truth. He convinced himself that his way was still obedience, but partial obedience is still disobedience. And because of that, Saul lost everything: his calling, his favor, his destiny, because his pride blocked him from fully surrendering to God's plan. Now, let me ask you, are you truly seeking God's direction in your life? Or are you just trying to convince Him to bless what you've already decided to do? It's easy to say that we trust God, but when things don't go the way we expect, when the answer to our prayer takes longer than we want, when the opportunity we thought was ours doesn't work out, when the path ahead seems uncertain, that's when our pride is tested. That's when we either humble ourselves and trust God's timing, or we try to take control and force things to happen our way. And that's exactly how so many people block their own blessings. They get impatient. They make decisions without praying. They ignore the small nudges from God telling them to wait. They refuse to let go of something that God has clearly told them to release. And then they wonder why they feel stuck. But here's the truth. God's grace flows freely to those who surrender. The moment you let go of control, the moment you humble yourself and say, God, I don't want my way, I want your way, that's when things begin to shift. That's when doors open that you could have never forced open on your own. That's when peace comes in, even when you don't have all the answers. So here's what I want you to do. Take a deep breath and ask yourself, am I truly trusting God, or am I just trying to convince Him to agree with my plans? If you know that pride has been keeping you from surrendering completely, make a decision right now. Write in the comments, God, I trust you. Speak it out loud. Because when you humble yourself, when you let go of the need to control, when you truly surrender, that's when you'll see God's grace move in ways you never imagined. And now, we need to talk about the final mistake, the one that could separate you from God forever. Don't miss this, the third mistake, the sin that separates you from God forever. Is a kind of mistake that doesn't just delay your blessings. It doesn't just slow you down. It puts you on a path where, if you keep walking, you may never find your way back. Sin. Not just any sin, but the kind that hardens your heart, so much that you no longer hear God's voice. The kind that makes you justify actions you once knew were wrong. The kind that, over time, pushes you so far from God that you don't even realize how lost you've become. Some people believe that sin is just about breaking rules, but it's so much deeper than that. Sin is separation. It is what disconnects you from the presence of God. And the most dangerous part? It doesn't always happen overnight. It happens gradually. A small compromise here, an excuse there, a decision made out of comfort instead of conviction. And before you know it, your heart has become numb. Think about Judas. He walked with Jesus. He saw miracles with his own eyes. He sat at the table with the Son of God. But somewhere along the way, his heart changed. Maybe it started as a small thought. Why is Jesus doing things this way? Why isn't he using his power differently? Maybe it grew into frustration, then into bitterness, and finally into betrayal. But here's the most tragic part. Judas didn't just betray Jesus, he betrayed himself. Because even after realizing his mistake, instead of turning back to God, instead of seeking mercy, he gave in to despair. He believed the lie that his sin was too big for redemption, that there was no way back, and that's exactly what the enemy wants you to believe, that you've gone too far, that you've made too many mistakes, that God won't take you back. But listen to me, as long as you have breath in your lungs, it is not too late. Yes, sin creates distance. Yes, it can make it harder to hear God's voice. But God's mercy is greater than your biggest failure. His grace is wider than your deepest regret. The only way to be lost forever is to refuse to turn back. So let me ask you, have you been walking away from God without even realizing it? Have you allowed certain habits, choices, or relationships to pull you so far that you don't feel His presence like you used to? Have you silenced His voice in your heart because you didn't want to hear the truth? If so, don't run, don't hide. Don't let guilt keep you trapped. Run back to Him. Right now, make the decision. Say these words out loud. God, I don't want to be far from you. I don't want my heart to grow cold. I choose to turn back. I ask for your mercy. I ask for your presence. I surrender my mistakes, my failures, and my fears. And I ask you to restore me. Right, Lord, I return to you in the comments. Declare it. Because today is a new beginning. God is not done with you. But you have to choose. Before it's too late, let's take a moment to reflect on everything we've talked about today. 3 mistakes, 3 dangerous traps that can hold you back from God's blessings, from His presence, from the life He designed for you. First, doubt, the silent killer of faith. The moment you start questioning God instead of trusting Him, you begin to sink. Just like Peter, who walked on water until he let fear take over. Doubt keeps you from experiencing the full power of God's promises. Pride, the invisible wall that blocks grace. When you try to do everything on your own, when you refuse to surrender, when you tell God what should happen instead of listening to Him, you are shutting yourself off from His best. Saul lost everything because of pride. Don't let pride keep you from the destiny God has for you. And finally, sin, the one thing that, if left unchecked, can separate you from God forever. When sin hardens your heart, when it makes you stop hearing God's voice, you risk walking so far away that you don't even realize how lost you've become. Judas made that mistake. He allowed his sin to define his end. But you don't have to. And that's the most important thing I want you to hear today. It's not too late. No matter how far you've gone, no matter how many mistakes you've made, God is calling you back. His arms are open. His grace is still available. But the decision is yours. You can keep going down the same path, ignoring the warnings, or you can choose today to turn back. So here's my challenge for you. Make a choice. Right now, type I choose God in the comments. Declare it. Make it real. And don't stop. Share this message with someone who needs to hear it before it's too late. Because today could be the day that changes everything. But only if you decide to let it.